Cells are the building blocks of life, and without them, life cannot exist. This is Learner's Aid, where scholars are needed. Imagine a house. Now imagine a whole town made up of many houses. That is how human beings and other living things are. In the same way, living things are made up of tiny units called cells. And when we say cells, we are referring to the functional units of life. So when you ask to define cell, one basic definition we want is this: cells are the basic units of life, or cells are the functional units of life. But interestingly, what does that mean when we say cells are the functional units of life? It means all the life processes that keep an organism alive happens inside the cells. All the life processes you can think of happens in the cell. But interestingly, the cells that we have in our bodies and in other living things are so tiny, very, very small, that they cannot be seen with the naked eye. So what do scientists use to view these cells? They use microscopes. So for example, electron microscopes and light microscopes helps scientists to view these tiny little cells that are impossible to be seen with the naked eye. So for example, our skin cells are made up of millions of cells. The same thing applies to our blood. Our blood has millions of cells in there. But how can these cells be viewed? You see, when you prick yourself and you collect some sample of blood, you see that blood that you collect is made up of cells in there, but you cannot see the cells with your eye, except with the help of microscopes. Scientists discovered important ideas about cells, and these ideas are known as the cell theory. So what exactly is cell theory? The cell theory has three main components. The first aspect of the cell theory that scientists came up with is this: they believe that all living things are made up of cells. That is one interesting aspect of the cell theory. All living things are made up of cells. No matter the size of the living thing, there should be a cell in there that should qualify the thing before you can describe it as a living thing. And then the cell is the basic unit of structure and function in living things. That's the next aspect of the cell theory. The cell is the basic unit of structure and function of living things. And finally, new cells come from existing cells. What that basically means is if there is no cell, there will be no life. No cell, no new cell. No old cell, no new cell, and no new cell, there will definitely be no life. Now let's discuss the types of cells. When we get to basic 7, when we talk about types of cell, we are mainly referring to these two types of cells: plant cell and animal cell for basic 7. That's all what you need to know. Types of cell for basic 7, all you need to know is plant cell and animal cells. These cells have many parts or components that we'll be discussing in this lesson. But there are some parts of the cell, both plant cell and animal cell, that are referred to as organelles. And examples of these parts are nucleus, vacuoles, mitochondria, and chloroplast. These are parts of the cell that have been grouped and given a unique name, that is organelles. But when you are asked to define an organelle, what will you say? So what is an organelle? What exactly is an organelle? You see, the name organelle has two parts: organ and L. Yes, organ and E-L-L-E. So organelle, it basically means little organ. That's what the organelle is. But what is an organelle? Or what are organelles? You see, organelles are small specialized structures in cells which operate like organs by carrying out specific tasks. So the parts that we mentioned, mitochondria, chloroplast, vacuole, they act as little organs on their own in the cells, performing specific function. So that is what we mean by an organelle. There are some parts of the cell that are not considered as organelles. So take note of that. Now that we've clarified what an organelle is, let's try to take some parts of both plant and animal cell, try our best to describe them, and look at some 2 or 3 functions of each. So we are starting with the very first one, the cell wall. What exactly is the cell wall of a cell? This is the description. A cell wall is a thick layer that surrounds the cell membrane. It is mainly made up of cellulose. Cell wall is permeable and found only in plant cells. What does that mean? The second part of the definition is what I want to stress on. First part, we said it is a thick layer that surrounds the cell membrane, meaning the cell wall is the first line of defense that comes before the cell membrane. And mind you, it is found only in plant cells. And in plant cells, cell walls are made up of cellulose. So it's also called the cellulose cell wall. But mind you, bacteria also have their own cell wall that is made up of peptidoglycan. But that's not what we are interested in. We are talking about the cell wall of plants that are made up of cellulose. And animal cells do not have cell wall. So that's a fundamental level description of a cell wall. But what are some functions of the cell wall of plants? The first function we have here is it protects the cell. So the cell wall serves as the first line of defense of the cell. We can think about every cell, both plant cell and animal cell, as a factory. And for animal cell, the factory has a fence wall. So the fence wall actually protects the inside of the factory. That's exactly what cell wall does. So it protects the cell. The next function is to give shape and structure to the cell. So cell walls give a particular shape and structure to the cell. And interestingly, in 2016 and 2018, there was a BECE question in relation to cell wall. What question is that? In which of the following structures in a living cell is cellulose found? Which of the following structures? So if you remember on the earlier slides when we spoke about cell wall, we said cell wall of plants contains what? Cellulose. So basically, that is the answer we're expecting. So the answer for this part is cellulose. Now the next part of the cell we'll be considering is the cell membrane, also known as the plasma membrane. What exactly is a plasma membrane? It is a thin, flexible membrane that encloses the cytoplasm. It is found in both animal and plant cells. Remember, the cell wall is found only in plant cells, but cell membrane is found in both what? Plants and animal cell. So that is the basic description of a cell membrane. What about the functions of a cell membrane? The first function we have is this. It controls what enters and exits the cell, maintaining homeostasis. Remember we said the cell wall is permeable? The difference between the cell wall and the cell membrane is this. The cell wall is fully permeable, but the cell membrane is semi-permeable. Semi-permeable meaning it allows certain substances to enter and allow certain substances to exit. So not every substance is allowed to completely enter or completely exit the cell. And that is done with the help of the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. The next function is to provide protection and structural support. The cell membrane also does that, especially for the animal cell. Remember, animal cells do not have cell wall. Remember, yes, animal cells do not have cell wall. So their only first line of defense is the cell membrane. And finally, cell membrane facilitates communication between cells through receptor proteins. So communication between cell A and cell B and cell C. These cells communicate, and that link of communication happens between cells through the cell membrane. So now we are done with the cell wall and cell membrane. Let's look at a question that was actually captured in 2017, multiple choice question, 2017, question number 28. The part of the living cell which is semi-permeable is what? Which part of the cell is semi-permeable? Obviously, the answer is what? Cell membrane. So the cell membrane is a part of the cell that is what? Semi-permeable. And remember what we said about semi-permeability of cells? Meaning what? They allow certain substances in and prevent others from entering. So they serve as the bodyguards, or should I say bodyguard, or security guards of the factory. We said the cell wall are like the fence wall, right? But the security guard of the cell are the cell membrane. So the security guard will check your ID identification to see if you have the permission to enter the factory or not. So they are quite partial in allowing substances in and out of the cell. So that's an interesting past question captured in this section. Now let's move to the next part of the cell, that is the nucleus. Remember, we compared the entire cell to a factory. The nucleus of a cell can be compared to the manager of the factory. We'll get to understand that soon. But let's first describe the nucleus. The nucleus is the dense spherical structure in the cytoplasm. The dense spherical structure in the cytoplasm. That is the nucleus. That's a very simple description. But what are some functions of the nucleus? Remember we said the nucleus acts like the manager of the factory? So let's look at some of the functions of the nucleus. The first function I have here is to store and protect genetic information, that is the DNA. So inside the nucleus is the genetic information, the deoxyribonucleic acid of the cell, the DNA, the genetic information. All of this information is stored in the cell. And which part of the cell? In the nucleus of the cell. So the nucleus of the cell stores and protects this genetic information. Everything that makes you who you are, that information is stored in the nucleus. Very, very important. The next function of the nucleus is it directs all cell activities, including growth and reproduction. So remember we said the manager of the cell is more like the nucleus, the manager of the factory is more like the nucleus of a cell. So the function or the role of a manager is to direct the activities of the factory, as simple as that. So the manager is in charge of what happens in the factory. The same way the nucleus tends to play a similar role. It directs all cell activities, growth, reproduction. The information for all of this comes from the what? Comes from the nucleus. So the nucleus is so important, see. Then final function we have is it contains the nucleolus, which makes ribosomes. We'll soon get to the function of the ribosome, but the nucleolus that is found in the nucleus makes this ribosome. And for what we have on the screen, the nucleus is that purple structure inside the nucleus, based on the image you have on the screen. Now let's move to the next organelle, that is the vacuole. How would you describe the vacuole of a cell? How will you describe the vacuole of a cell? The vacuole is a sac that contains fluid, that is cell sap. Now the cell sap is a mixture of water, sugar, and salt. Animal cells have small and temporary vacuole, while plant cells have large and permanent ones. In plant cells, the vacuole occupies the largest section of the cytoplasm of the plant cell. That is one interesting fact I want you to keep. And then we have a large and permanent one in plant cell. But in animal cell, the vacuoles are small, temporal, and mini inside the cell of animals. And when we want to compare the cells to a factory, we can compare the vacuole to more like the water tank or the storage section of the factory. You see, we said the vacuole is a sac that contains fluid, more like the storage tank or storage section of a factory. Let's look at some functions of the vacuole. What are some functions of the vacuum? The first one, stores water, nutrients, and waste products. You see what we said earlier? Like every functioning factory should have a storage area, storeroom for storing essential things like water and the raw materials that they need. Vacuum also stores these things for the cell. So the vacuum stores water, nutrients, and waste products. And also maintains cell structure by providing turgor pressure, keeping the plant rigid. Cell structure. Remember we said cell wall gives structure to the cell. Yes, that is true. But one interesting thing to keep that shape, that turgor pressure of the cell also comes from the vacuum. And finally, vacuum helps in detoxification by isolating harmful substances. That's one interesting thing we should pay attention to vacuums. They help in detoxification by isolating harmful substances. Interesting. But interestingly, I want to draw attention to 2017, question number 28. The organelle which occupies the largest portion of a plant cell is the, you remember I mentioned that just some few minutes ago or seconds ago. The organelle which occupies the largest portion of a plant cell is the, what's the answer? The answer is definitely the vacuole, like we said earlier. So the vacuole occupies the largest portion of a plant cell. And animal cell, it is nowhere the vacuole. Because remember I said in animal cells, the vacuole are small, tiny, temporal, and meaning in the cell. Good. So that has been cleared for us. Let's move to the next part of the cell. That is the mitochondria. The mitochondria is a double membrane organelle with the inner membrane folded into structures called crystal. So if you look at the structure I have on the screen, you can see that we have the outer membrane, then an inner membrane. Pay attention, the inner membrane is folded. Do you see that? So the inner membrane is folded into a structure called crystal. Now, mitochondria contain their own DNA, allowing them to produce some of their own proteins. That's one interesting thing about mitochondria. And remember, it is a double membrane organelle. So a question like that can be asked to mention an organelle that has two membranes. So don't forget to mention mitochondria. And I think the singular is called mitochondrion. So take note of these spellings as well. What are some functions of the mitochondria? Some functions of the mitochondria. For the first function, it generates energy for the cell through cellular respiration. So what does that mean? Respiration in cells occur in the mitochondria. So another question you can be asked is, what is the site for cellular respiration? And the answer should be mitochondria. And it is through this cellular respiration that energy is produced for the cell in the form of ATP. So it generates energy for the cell through cellular respiration. And then it converts glucose and oxygen into adenosine triphosphate, the cell's main energy source. That's one interesting. So the first and second function are quite connected. So the result of this respiration is to produce what? Energy. If you remember the definition of respiration. So respiration, the main end product, the main end goal of respiration is to give us energy. So it converts glucose and oxygen into adenosine triphosphate. And finally, it helps in cell growth, cell division, and cell metabolism. And that is so important because cell growth, cell division, before the cell can undergo division, either mitosis or meiosis, it needs energy to do that. And where would the energy come from? You get it right. Now let's go back to our factory analogy. We said the cell can be compared to a factory, right? And then cell wall is more like the fence wall. Cell membrane is more like the security guard on post to check who enters and who leaves. And then we spoke about the vacuole acting like the storage room or storage tank. Now what about the mitochondria? The mitochondria are basically as the generator, the powerhouse, it stores power or energy for the factory to keep running. So imagine the source of electricity, the source of power for the factory to act, to function effectively is the mitochondria. So think of mitochondria as such for the cell. So these are some functions of the mitochondria. Now, we will not leave the mitochondria just like that. In 2015, question number 30, there was this question, BECE question number 30, 2015. The component of a living cell responsible for respiration is? The component of a living cell responsible for respiration is what? Is it chloroplast, mitochondria, nucleus, vacuole? The answer is mitochondria. That is the component of a living cell responsible for respiration. Cellular respiration, of course. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part of the cell. That is the ribosomes. Ribosomes. How would we describe a ribosome? So ribosomes are tiny round structures found in the cytoplasm or attached to the rough ER. ER is endoplasmic reticulum. We'll get there. Don't worry. ER, endoplasmic reticulum. Now take note of this. Ribosomes are tiny round structures found in the cytoplasm or attached to the rough ER. They are made of RNA and proteins and do not have a membrane. So you can be asked, mention a structure, an organelle or a part of a cell that doesn't have membrane. Don't forget to mention the ribosome. It doesn't have a membrane. That's a quick description. Let's look at some functions of the ribosome. What are the functions? First, synthesizes proteins by assembling amino acids based on genetic instructions. So basically what that point means is that the ribosome is responsible for making proteins, as simple as that. So the ribosome receives information and based on that instruction or information is able to assemble amino acids for making proteins. So amino acids are the basic unit for making proteins. So the instruction, ribosome receives it and knows that, okay, bring this, bring that. Okay, you come. Then it links all these amino acids to make protein. That instruction comes and ribosome knows exactly what to do. So the ribosome does the manufacturing, yes, the manufacturing part of the cell, yes, the factories, the machineries. And the next part of the function of the ribosome is it plays a role in cell growth and cell repairs. Before we move on, let me just link the ribosome back to our factory. Remember a big factory? In their factory, we have machines. So imagine a factory produces biscuits. Yes, the factories produce biscuits. So there are machines in the factory that are responsible for assembling the various things to make the end product, that's the biscuit. That's how ribosomes behave. So they are more like the machineries that are used to make these stuffs. Now, the next and final function of the ribosome is it works closely with other organelles to produce and transport protein. So that's more like the first point. Works with other organelles to produce and transport proteins. Interesting. Now let's look at the next part of the cell, that is Golgi apparatus, also referred to as Golgi body. Golgi apparatus. Description. A Golgi apparatus is a stack of membrane-bound sacs located in the cytoplasm. Golgi apparatus, a stack of membrane-bound sacs. So Golgi apparatus or Golgi body also has what? Membrane around it. So what are some functions of the Golgi apparatus or Golgi body of the cell? Some functions of the Golgi apparatus. Functions. First, it modifies salts and package proteins and lipids for transport. So it modifies salts, packages proteins, and lipids for transport. That's one function of the Golgi apparatus. And then it also creates vesicles to send materials to different parts of the cell or outside the cell. So we can think of The Golgi apparatus as in charge of assembling and then transport guys of the factory. So now these important aspects that are needed in the cells are made. Golgi apparatus functions by sending these materials to different part of the cell or outside of the cell. So you see how complex the tininess of cell can be. It's so tiny we cannot see it with our naked eyes, but the intricacies that happens inside of the cell begs the question, are these things created or they evolved? Can you imagine? So people believe all of these things evolved on their own, but thinking about these things, the functions, the part of the cell, and the functions they play, it begs for the concept of a designer behind all of these things. Someone sat down and actually designed all of these things. And the next function is it produces lysosomes, which breaks down waste. We'll be looking at lysosomes very soon. So all of these things are also made by the Golgi apparatus. It produces lysosome, which breaks down waste. Now let's look at ER, endoplasmic reticulum. We have two types of endoplasmic reticulum. We have the rough endoplasmic reticulum and then the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. But let's start with the first one, the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Description. The rough ER is a network of membrane-covered tubes and sacs located near the nucleus. It is called rough because it is stuffed with ribosomes, giving it a bumpy appearance. So basically, the main difference between rough endoplasmic reticulum and smooth endoplasmic reticulum is the presence or absence of ribosome. So if there are ribosomes attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, then it is described as what? A rough endoplasmic reticulum. And guess what? It is located near the nucleus. So what are some functions of the rough ER? It processes proteins with the help of ribosome. Remember when we're talking about ribosomes, we said it works with other organelles in making proteins. So one of those organelles is the endoplasmic reticulum. So it processes proteins with the help of ribosome. And then it transports protein to the Golgi apparatus for modification and packaging. So remember, for proteins to be made, amino acids are linked together to form long, so we have long chains of amino acids. That is what forms protein. But just it in that structure is not very useful. So it has to be modified, restructured, then it becomes useful. So it's the ER transports these long chains of amino acids, which is protein, to Golgi apparatus for modification. So the organelles work hand in hand. So the organelles are not like islands on their own. So it's more like there is a designer out there who made these things, specifically designed the cells, and then having organelles working hand in hand to meet an end goal. That's so amazing and interesting. Then the next function of the ER is it helps in the production of membranes and other cellular components. ER, so powerful. Let's move to the next ER, that is a smooth ER. The smooth ER is a network of membrane-covered tubes and sacs without ribosome. That's the only difference. Without ribosome. And take note, giving it a smooth appearance. Now, one main point, it does not participate in protein synthesis. It doesn't participate in protein synthesis like the rough ER does. But it doesn't have ribosome on it. That is why it is called smooth ER. Functions of the smooth ER. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Synthesizing lipids, including fat, phospholipids, and steroids. Interesting. Synthesizes lipids, including fats, phospholipids, and steroids. That's smooth ER for you. And it detoxifies harmful substances in the cell. Any harmful substances, toxic ones, it just nullifies its toxicity. Detoxifies harmful substances in the cell. Detoxifies, toxic, detoxify. stop it from being toxic. That's one function of the endoplasmic reticulum, the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And then we have it stores and regulates calcium ions, which are important for cell signaling and function. Cell signaling and function. So when I talk about these stuffs, like the cell, the organelles, the part of the cell, and the role that they play, I become so happy because all of these things are happening as you are watching this lesson at this point in time. And if you're enjoying the lesson, pause the video, go down there, hit the like button, share this video with other students you know will benefit from lessons like this, and subscribe to the channel so that this will encourage us to make more interesting and similar lessons like these for your benefit. Because the end goal or the purpose of this channel is to take you from an absolute beginner to a complete scholar. Yes, trust me, we really want to achieve that goal. Now we have lysosome. What are the description before we move to function? Lysosomes are small membrane-bound organelles filled with digestive enzymes. They are more common in animal cells but can be found in some plant cells. More common in animal cells. So lysosomes are small membrane-bound organelles filled with digestive enzymes. What are the functions of lysosomes? Functions, let's look at this. It breaks down and digests waste, damaged organelles, and cellular debris. So when it comes to the cell, and in comparison to the factory, we can compare the lysosome to the garbage men of the cell. It's garbage men, yeah, garbage men and garbage women, right? So the garbage men and garbage women, their function or their role in the factory is to clean stuffs, right? Waste, get those things out of the factory. So the lysosomes break down and digest waste, damaged organelles, and cellular debris. So fantastic and so important to the survival of the cell. And then we have, it helps in defense by destroying harmful bacteria and viruses. So it doesn't only take care of cellular debris, it also defends the cell. So helps in defense by destroying harmful bacteria and viruses. Thank God for the lysosome. Think interestingly. Every aspect of the cell is there for a reason. So interesting and amazing just thinking about the design behind these stuffs. And it recycles useful molecules to be reused by the cell. So it doesn't just collect wastes and takes care of cellular debris. It also functions as a recycling part of the factory. So it realizes that there are certain aspects of the cell that can be recycled to be used. These molecules can be reused by the cell, but just some little modification, and this is done by the lysosome. Interesting design, right? So every part of the cell is so important. So far, we've looked and discussed some interesting part of the cell that are common to both plants and animals. Now let's look at one interesting part again that is common to only plants. That is the chloroplast. So the chloroplast is a green double membrane bound organelle found in plant cells. So remember I spoke about mitochondria having double membrane. So you can be asked to mention organelles that have a double membrane. Chloroplast, mitochondria. So the chloroplast is a green double membrane organelle found only in plant cells. It contains chlorophyll, the pigment responsible for capturing sunlight. So when I talk about chloroplast and its role in capturing sunlight, then I think about the factory's solar panels. You see, solar panels capture sunlight to make energy, right? The same thing, chloroplast of plants will capture sunlight to enable the plant to make energy. Yes, photosynthesis. All of this is done with the help of captured sunlight by the chloroplast. So that's one interesting description of chloroplast. And there was a past question like that, section B. What is chloroplast, or describe a chloroplast? So it is something you should pay attention to. Functions of the chloroplast. 1. It converts sunlight into chemical energy through photosynthesis. Sunlight raw, some hot, useless. But with the help of chloroplast, The chloroplast converts it into chemical energy through photosynthesis. So in its raw state for plants, it's not useful. But with the help of chloroplast, it becomes so useful. And chloroplast produces glucose, that is food, and oxygen as byproducts. So chloroplast produces food and then goes ahead to produce oxygen as a byproduct. Good. Then finally, we have it stores energy needed for plant growth and survival. Interesting and useful chloroplast. To end the part of the cell, one interesting thing to end that with is we're talking about the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm of a cell. The cytoplasm of a cell is actually not an organelle. It is just the space, the inner space of the cell. So if you pick both the plant cell and the animal cell, the organelles, those structures are found in the cell, inside the cell. That jelly-like substance that is found inside the cell, in which all the organelles move, that inside space is known as the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is a jelly-like substance found inside the cell, between the cell membrane and the nucleus, where all organelles are found. So when we want to compare to the factory, we can compare the cytoplasm to the space, the inside space, work area of the factory. That's what cytoplasm can be compared to. So far, so good. We've considered the cell, the parts, vital organelles, little organs, and the functions that they play. I think we are left with talking about the function of the cytoplasm. Yes, cytoplasm is the medium where all life processes and chemical reactions in the cell occurs. It's the medium where all life processes and chemical reactions in the cell occur. So without the cytoplasm, all the organelles wouldn't have a place to be and function effectively. Good. So we've talked about plant cell, animal cell, and their parts and functions. So let's now compare plant cell, animal cell in this table. So I've given out 5 comparisons in terms of differences. For the similarities, I'll leave that to yourself. Look at which organelles are common to both plant and animal cell. So differences between plant and animal cell. For plant cell, it is bounded by cell wall. And animal cell is bounded by a plasma or cell membrane. Plant cells have chloroplasts. Animal cells lack chloroplast. So plant cell, there's chloroplast because it's necessary for photosynthesis, but animal cells do not photosynthesize. Would it be good if we photosynthesize? That means in our system there would be chloroplast, right? And then when you're hungry, you just stand in the sun. You just be there. And then you photosynthesize. That's quite amazing. Wouldn't it be nice? I don't even want to think about that possibility anyway. And then plant cells have large and permanent vacuole. And remember, the vacuole occupies the largest portion of the cytoplasm. And animals have small and temporal vacuoles. Animals store carbohydrates as starch and plants store it as glycogen. Animal cells have a definite shape while plant cells lack definite shape. So here are some clear-cut differences between plant cell and animal cell. And for the similarities between plant cell and animal cells, I leave that to you. If you know some similarities, you can leave it in the comment section. What are some similarities? I mean, organelles that are common to both plant and animal cell. You can talk about vacuole and mitochondria. You can talk about nucleus, also common to both plant and animal cell. So far, so good. We've spoken about cells, but how cells become organisms. I am an organism, right? You are an organism. Plants are organisms. These are complex organisms, but we are all made up of cells. We say cell is the basic and functional unit of life. But how do we start from cell all the way to you or to me? How? Or to plants? How does it start? So look at this. Cell to tissue, tissue to organ system, and organism. That is how it happens. So the first level of complexity of living thing is the cell. So the cell is the functional unit of life. So we have red blood cell, white blood cell, blood platelets. They have the nerve cells. All of these cells are the functional units of life. And then we have group of cells that form tissue. For example, the blood is a tissue made up of blood cells and plasma. So group of cells with similar functions is what we call tissue. And then we have group of tissues coming together to form organs. So a group of tissue with similar function is organs. So our heart is an organ, kidney, our bones, all of these are organs. Then we have organs coming together to form organ system. So we have the circulatory system, reproductive system, respiratory system, the nervous system, the skeletal system, the digestive system. So if you pick the digestive system, we have organs coming together to form this digestive system. The same thing applies to the other systems. Then we have these systems coming together to form you, an organism. So group of systems form a living thing. So we start from cell to tissue, organs to organ system, and then we have an organism that is a living thing. So that is how cells become organisms. I've actually used humans to explain it, but the same concept applies to plants. We have cells, plant cells, they have all they coming together from tissues, they have organs, organ systems, then we have a plant. So it doesn't apply to only animals, it also applies to plants as well. So that's how cells become organisms. Now the final concept we talk about is unicellular and multicellular organisms. So we're speaking about plants, animals, but there are other groups of living things I've not mentioned here. So for this section, we'll be talking about them. We have unicellular and multicellular organisms. We said cells make up organisms, right? But there are certain organisms that are made up of just one cell. So these living things are known as unicellular organisms. So unicellular organisms are living things that are made up of just one cell. Just one. Example, amoeba, paramecium, bacteria, all of these are unicellular organisms. Amoeba, bacteria, paramecium, just one cell, unicellular organism. Then at the other side of the equation or the spectrum, we have living things that are made up of a lot of cells, like you and I. And we are known as the multicellular organisms. So multicellular organisms are living things that are made up of a lot of cells. A lot. So you have blood cells, brain cells, kidney cells, skin cells, bone cells, all of this coming together to form you. So there are a lot of thousands, millions of cells coming together to form just one living thing. And any living thing that is made up of multiple cells is known as multicellular organism. Multiple cells, multicellular organism. So that is unicellular and multicellular organism for you. So I'm sure you've really enjoyed these lessons because I have really enjoyed myself teaching this lesson. I actually enjoy teaching this aspect of science, So let's pick some sample past questions. The basic unit of life, what is it? What is the basic unit of life? What's the answer? We have cells, nucleus, organ, then we have tissue. This is 2018, question 10. What is the answer? Write the answer in the comment section. Yeah. What do you think? Is it cell or it's nucleus? Is it an organ or is it tissue? Go watch this lesson if you forgot what the answer is. The next question. Which of the following pairs of structures are present in animal cells? Which of the following pairs? We have mitochondria and chloroplasts. That obviously is wrong. Why? Because mitochondria is present in animal cells, but chloroplast is present only in plant cells. Now we have cell wall and mitochondria. Obviously, it's wrong. Cell wall is present only in plant cells. Animal cells do not have cell wall. They have vacuole and nucleus. Oh, that is correct. Yes. The nucleus and chloroplast is also out because chloroplast is found only in plant cells. This question is a 2023 question. Just some few years ago. Question number 1. So if you see this question in your final year exam, that is a bonus. Which of the following pairs of structures are present in animal cells? So what is the answer? Write it in the comment section. And then we have 2011, question number 40. Which of the following arrangements show the correct order of increasing complexity of structures in living organisms? That's just some few slides from here. Which of the following arrangements shows the correct order of increasing complexity of structures in living organisms? Is this cell to organs, to tissue, to system, or cells to tissues, to organs, to system, or cells to system, to tissue, to organs, or cells to tissue, to system, to organs? Which of them is the correct answer? For me personally, I think it's cells to tissues, to organs, to systems. But I welcome you to disagree with me. Yes. Maybe I'm misleading you, maybe. Is it cells to tissues, to organs, to system? You can think about that. Then we have, which of the following organisms is or are multicellular? Automatically, you've seen amoeba. Oh, so I know this is amoeba. Amoeba is unicellular. Paramecium is unicellular. So the only multicellular is onion. Maybe you're right. Yes. So what do you think? It's 2014, question number 33. You can go check it out. If you don't have a past question, I will encourage you to get one. That is one interesting and easy way of acing your final year exam. Because no matter the kind of question you are given, it's mostly always recycled past questions. And even if they modify the question, it's still the same idea. The same question in different styles, right? If you understand the fundamentals, no matter how they restructure the question, you will get it. So each of the following organisms is or are multicellular. What is your pick? Is it A, B, C, or D? Leave your answer in the comment section. Now let's pick some section B questions and essay type questions. 2007, question number 2. 2A, what is a living cell? And the answer is there. A living cell is the smallest basic unit of life. Or it is the functional unit of life. Good. So, and then give one function each of the following components of a living cell: cell membrane, chloroplast, nucleus. Refer to earlier explanations for answers. Yeah, so if you have actually skipped the video to this section, please go back and go and watch the function of the cell membrane, the chloroplast, and then the nucleus of the cell. Or better still, you can check your past question 2007 question 2 A and B. And I have an assignment for you. 2017 question 3C. Explain the following terms as associated with living organisms: unicellular and multicellular. Uni, one. Multi, many. So you can think about it that way. Unicellular, uni, one. Multi, many. Then we have 2024, just recently. Question 4C. State 3 observable features of an animal cell, meaning 3 parts of an animal cell. And I believe you'll be able to do that. And state 2 functions of a nerve cell. 2024, a nerve cell is an animal cell in a way. Please check 2024 BECE past question. If you do not have it, then go get any past question of your choice. Anyone that you like. Interesting. So this is Learner's Aid, and thank you for learning with us. This lesson is very long. I think it's long, right? So if you have watched from the very first minute all the way to now, Congratulations for completing and learning with us. And I pray that you will be able to remember everything you've learned here. And even if you've forgotten, just re-watch this lesson, especially if you are taking your exam anytime soon. You can re-watch this lesson as a refresher course for this topic. So thank you once more for learning with us, and thank you, my future scholar. Subscribe to the channel. Tell others about Learner's Aid. Share this channel with other students you know will benefit from videos like this. See you in our next lesson.